Of all of the intros, this is the one that I'm most nervous to actually give. And I joined the KIT team in 2017. The first thing that I remember about the Craft and Commerce Conference is actually not Nathan Barry. It's not James Clear being on stage talking about getting 1% better, but it's Barrett Brooks standing and doing this exact job that I'm doing here, emceeing this conference. And if I'm being totally honest, I know for a fact that I will never do this job the way that Barrett has done it. And that's because Barrett is genuinely one of the best communicators of any human being that I've ever met. He's actually been a part of Craft and Commerce in more ways than many people even know. Craft and Commerce was one of those, he worked at KIT, obviously, but it was derived at a KIT then convert KIT retreat, and he and the team dreamed it up and ultimately brought it to life. All that to say, he's never actually given a keynote at this event, and it feels like it's a really, really, really overdue conversation to have. And so I'm very excited that he has agreed to join us on stage. You guys, I'm actually nervous. I feel like I'm shaking a little bit. But all that to say, I want to say something before I bring him out. We're all here because we love what we're building, and a lot of us are in a season of hard. Even though we're building things that we love, sometimes, Sam talked about it last year, where you're talking about there's what's happening on the outside, what everybody sees, but then there's always the things that are happening on the inside. And Barrett is one of the coaches out there that he's coached. Raise your hand if you've been coached by Barrett Brooks in this room. Jay Papasan. There's a lot of really, really important people in this room that have had the pleasure to spend time with Barrett and to be coached by him. And he's just one of those people that is his magic is in the long story long. And he's just one of those people that can get to the heart of really, really hard things. And so this is going to be it's going to be a heavier talk. So I'm asking that you guys lean in because this is where Barrett's magic happens. And I know that's why there's literally all of these people in the front row. We were backstage and I was like, look at all of the people that you've impacted that are in the front row because what he does is magic. So all that to say, please welcome one of my dearest friends, the creator-ish of this conference, Barrett Brooks.
In July 2015, I sat in a seat in Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall in Portland, Oregon at World Domination Summit, and I listened to a talk by this guy. Many of you may recognize him. It's Lewis Howes from the School of Greatness, and his talk that year was called The Myth of Masculinity. What I didn't yet know was that talk was going to change my life. Lewis got on stage and extremely courageously shared a story about his past, which is that he had been sexually abused when he was young, at just the age of 5 years old. And what happened as I sat there and listened to his story was that it felt like the curtain of my life fell down around me. Something was revealed to me that I hadn't previously known, which was that I too was sexually abused when I was younger by an older male relative for years on end. And up until that moment, I had never admitted that to myself or to anyone else in my life. I want you to imagine sitting in a room like this. Some of you may have this experience today. I was in a polo, 7-inch khakis. I was still kind of in college mode at the time. I was a frat boy in college, with apologies. But you're sitting in a conference and you get up and you walk out of there and you're surrounded by friends, and their experience of something that you just heard is completely different than yours. What do you do with that? How do you respond? What do you say? I walked out of that room and honestly, I just stayed quiet for the next few hours. And I had a dinner scheduled with some friends and colleagues that night. And I finally worked up the courage to say something to one of the colleagues there. I turned to him and I said, hey man, Lewis's story today, I got to be honest, that's my story. I experienced something very similar when I was younger. and I just need someone to know. I'll never forget his response. He said, "Fuck, man, that's heavy." And then he looked back at the menu and asked what everyone wanted for dinner. A couple hours later, we had gone back to a friend's house in Portland, and I decided I could still use some support, so I called my brother. I love my brother. We've not always been very close, but I called him. I told him the story. Here's what happened. Here's what I learned today. And he says, "Damn, dude, I don't know what to say." And then silence. I think we talked about the weather for a couple minutes and then hung up. And believe it or not, I did try one more time. A couple weeks later, I was at my childhood home in my parents' kitchen, standing across from my fiance at the time, who's now my wife, Nicole, and my mom. And I stood across the counter, and I felt like very courageously told my mom, my wife knew, or my fiance knew at that point, but I told my mom, I said, "Here's what happened, and here's who did it to me." And of course, she knew who it was. And what my mom said immediately after was, "Don't tell your father." I wish I was making this up. It was almost comical at this point. I could not imagine 3 things that a person could hear that would feel like less support than those 3 things at the time. And so what I did was exactly what you imagine you would do. I stuffed it back down. This was clearly not something to talk about. It's not something people want to hear about, and they don't know what to do when you say it to them. So for 4 years, until we got pregnant with our first son, I kept it inside. I hid it. I never said anything again. It wasn't safe. Then my beautiful wife's belly started to grow, and I started imagining all the things I was going to get to do with my first son. Go to the park, play baseball, roll around on the ground and tickle him, but also the more mundane things. Change his diaper, bathe him, all the things you do for your children. And then I started to notice some panic, some fear coming up for me. If you know anything about abuse, you know that often what happens to you often gets passed on to others. And that terrified me. Would I be part of that statistic who passed it on to someone I loved? And I knew in that moment, before my son was born, that I would be willing to do anything to avoid that. And that before he came into this world, I had to heal myself so I could be the kind of dad that he deserved. So I got up the courage one more time. This is years after the last time. And I asked for help from my wife and from our couples therapist, who we had been seeing since we got married, just as a relational wellness practice. And this time, they knew exactly what to do. My therapist had been through this over and over. She had seen this story before, and she ran me through a process. For 6 or 9 months, we went through a series of joint sessions together and solo sessions with just me and the therapist. And in the joint sessions, I shared every nitty-gritty detail of every instance that I could remember of what happened to me. And God bless Nicole, man, she sat right there. And I can't imagine how angry it must have made her feel, how painful it must have been to hear it. But she was there for every single word. And in the solo sessions, our therapist used a technique called Gestalt therapy, where you sit across from an open chair. I'd go to our meetings, and I would imagine a peaceful scene, something like this, sitting in the woods by a flowing stream, kind of my happy place. I'd imagine myself in the chair, sitting across from someone that I really needed to hear something from me that wasn't there for me at the time. Mom, where were you? Aunts and uncles, how did you not notice something was up? How did no one in my life see that my horrible OCD started right after this thing was happening? Where were the adults in the room? I had conversation after conversation and session after session, racing against the clock of our son's birth. And then I came to one conversation that I knew needed to be more than imaginary. This conversation needed to happen in real life, needed to be with the person who had done this to me. And so my therapist and I agreed that I needed to write a letter. And this letter needed to be to this relative who had done to me what I didn't ask for. And at first, we did it as an exercise. She would read it. And then I knew that it needed to be real, and I needed to send it. So I sit down at my desk at home, and I write a letter that's 20 years in the making. It's time to end my silence. I'm here to acknowledge what we both know, and I need to share the pain that I've been through. I don't write this note to accuse you or embarrass you. I write this note to heal. Over 20 years ago, you sexually abused me. You were older. You had power over me, and you used it. I want to enter fatherhood with a clean heart and a clean mind. Will you have coffee with me? I send the letter, and he agrees to have coffee with me, to his credit. But I need to look him in the eyes, and I need him to know I'm not carrying this shit anymore. This is yours, not mine. About 2 weeks after that, we had a trip scheduled to go to Atlanta, Athens to be specific, for the glorious University of Georgia Bulldogs, who are going to be playing a football game. Thank you very much. Yes, always love a dog. And I used this opportunity to ask my relative to have coffee with me. This was the ask. And so we agreed for a time to meet up at his house. And Nicole and I rode to a coffee shop ahead of time, and we sat down there. And she just reminded me how loved I was, how there's nothing that he could say that would change anything that happened, and that I had everything I needed. And I left her there down the street from his house, and I hopped in our silver Toyota Corolla from Hertz and drove over. I sat in that driveway for a couple minutes, and I really thought about whether I wanted to go through with this. Everything in me was shaking, sweating. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to leave. But my son was coming, and I knew I owed this to him. So I got out of the car, and I walked up to the door, and I knocked. I just want you to feel what that might be like, to be walking up to a door, asking to have this kind of conversation. What might be going on for you in your stomach, your mind, your body. It's probably roughly what was going on for me at the time too. He opened the door and he welcomed me just like you would a relative. Hey man, how's it going? The family went out. I told them about this whole thing. They'll be back later. Okay. And then he made me a cup of Keurig coffee, which as a person from Portland is deeply offensive. Like, come on. So anyways, we take our Keurig coffee and we go sit on the couch. And I ask him some questions. I ask him, was this because of your parents' divorce? No. Did this happen to you? Were you passing this along from someone else? No. Was there another reason I'm not aware of? Was there something going on in your life? No. So what was it? Well, I don't know, man. I mean, you're using this term of abuse. I don't think of it as abuse. I just think of it as a couple young men fooling around. But I'm sorry for how that's affected you. There was no reason. There was no meaning. It was just fooling around to him. That's not what it was to me. We sat there for about an hour and had a lengthier conversation, and I said goodbye, got back in the rental car and drove back to that coffee shop. And on the way, the shaking finally stopped. The sweating finally stopped. And I realized that while I could take that all as pretty crushing, that there was no meaning to all of this, even though I'd been carrying it for so long, what I actually felt was strong. I had confronted the thing. I didn't need anything from him other than for him to know this isn't mine and you're taking it back. And I had done that. That was the healing act. It wasn't what he said back to me. And I got to tell you, I've never felt a more relieving hug than my wife opening up her arms when I got back to that coffee shop. And just in case you were wondering, the Georgia Bulldogs crushed the Notre Dame Fighting Irish that weekend. Three days later, I was back at work doing whatever the hell this was. Oh my God, poor CT. Alexis was singing some song, and I think I was supporting her. And Morgan looks disengaged, but she was taking the screenshot. So I go back to work. I'm leading meetings, reviewing metrics, planning ad campaigns, doing whatever we were doing here. I was back in my role as COO at Kit, ConvertKit at the time, but we'll use the proper terminology now. Everything about my context was the same. I went back to the same life, but everything within me had started to change. And what I didn't yet know was I thought I was healed. I thought I had done it. I had slayed the dragon. I did the thing. Now I'm ready for fatherhood. Everything's going to be great from here. That's not how this stuff works. That's never how it works. Abuse is what we might call kind of big T trauma. And if statistics hold in this room, something like 100 of you have gone through some version of that. I see you. I know what that's like. But also, most of this room hasn't. And I want to make sure that you don't mistake this talk, because it's not just a talk about abuse. It's actually a talk about the 1,000 little things that we all go through that shape us. And for me, abuse was just the big one. And what I was wrong about that I didn't yet understand was that all the other 1,000 things were still active. They were still running a story in the background for me that I was living subconsciously every day when I showed up to work. And that's the universal truth at the beginning of this talk, is that we all have 1,000 little things we go through that shape us. And these things dictate a story that we're living internally. And this is the story I see every day with my clients. And until you become aware of it, you can't work with it. It controls everything about your work, your leadership, how you love, how you relate to people. Some of my 1,000 things were my dad coaching every one of my Little League teams, the gifted test scores and the weight of potential, how my mom would break down every area of every sports game I ever played in and coach me instead of nurturing me. Being 4'10" going into high school, me and Pat Flynn, what up? That one bully that just seemed to track me all the way from kindergarten to 12th grade. And the way my dad yelled at me when he was overwhelmed. And you have your 1,000 things too. Every one of you has 1,000 little things that have shaped you. Good, bad, triumphs, hardships. Take a moment, call them to mind. What brought you here today? What shaped you as you arrived? These things added up to a story that I was carrying around with me. And you have your version too. But my story sounded like this. It's all my fault. My needs don't matter. And nothing I ever do will be enough. This wasn't conscious. No one told me to believe this. No one sat me down and said, like, here's your software update with your story you're going to carry around. It was just in there. It was in my body. It was in my mind. It was in my actions. And it showed up in every single relationship I had in my life. And to be sure, this was a successful story. I was the COO of a nearly $30 million a year software company. This one right here. It worked. All the way until it didn't. I think back, it's like, when did it stop working? When did it no longer allow me to make the progress I wanted in my life? And I don't know, to be honest. But I know the moment when I realized it wasn't working. And it was after the context of my life just made it impossible to keep going with that same background operating system, that same story. We had our son. My in-laws moved in with us. We bought a house. And the pandemic started, all in a 4-month period. I still had this company that I was helping lead. And that looked like a big ball of stress. And it showed up over and over at work. There were the performance reviews I would write where I would say, all of the targets we've missed, that's all my fault. There were all the hires I asked for, all the resources I thought that we needed to get where we were going that we didn't get, we weren't able to afford. My needs don't matter. And there was the feedback at every team retreat that pierced me like an arrow. Nothing I ever do will be enough. And eventually inside, I just started to crumble. I got bitter. I got frustrated. I got disconnected from myself, from my relationships. And then I started projecting all of my resentment onto the people I cared about most. My wife, Nathan, our team. It was anyone else's fault but mine. And that's when that moment came. I made my nightly pandemic old-fashioned. I sat down on the couch, just looking at my phone, probably checking Slack or something, turned the TV on, mindlessly sitting there. Nicole pops in at some point, sits down next to me. I don't even acknowledge her. She says a couple small words. Are you okay? What do you mean, am I okay? Are you okay? Because it doesn't seem like you're okay to me. You're not present. You work all the time. You're on your phone nonstop. When I ask you small questions, you get irritable. You don't seem like you've been okay for a long time. And as I see it, you have three options. You can change your attitude, you can quit your job, or we can get divorced. It wasn't an ultimatum. It wasn't like, or else. It was just a statement of fact. It wasn't working for anyone. Least of all our son, the person that I was supposed to be healing for. And you might think I felt scared at this conversation, but actually I felt huge relief. I felt permission to finally leave the circumstances I thought were causing me all the pain. I could quit my job. I don't have to do this anymore. So I went to my best friend and I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep going. I got to quit. In 5 years here, we had grown from 3 to 30 million in revenue, 18 to 75 teammates. We'd established ourselves in the creator economy as one of the leading companies, and I was done. And I got to that last day, and I remember sitting out on my porch, and I got on Slack, and I said, all right, y'all, I'm logging off. And, we have a globally remote team. It's like everyone was east of me. So I'm logging off at the end of my last day. I've been here 5 years, my favorite job I've ever had. Love this company. And no one's online because they're already onto their weekend. It was the most anticlimactic thing ever. Through no one's fault of their own, right? It was just like, all right, see you later. And I logged out and I just started bawling. I had lost this thing that I love. I love this company. I still love this company to this day. And what I didn't yet know was that I was grieving. I was grieving the loss of a huge part of my life. And I was grieving what was going to happen next, which was I still had to change the story. So I planned to take 6 to 18 months off. We had some cash in the bank at this point from things. And it's not the point of the story. So I was going to take time off. I was going to look inwards. I was going to figure out, what do I need next? Where am I going from here? And then I got an email, and you might recognize the guy who sent it. This guy named Seth Godin. Maybe you've heard of him. And when Seth emails, I don't know, I open it at least. I give it a read. And he's like, hey, Barrett, I heard you're free these days. You want to make a book about climate change? And I'm like, hell yes, let's do this right now. Fastest email I've ever answered. Time off? No. Looking inwards? Absolutely not. Why would we do that? Let's go make a book. And not just any book, a 300-page almanac about one of the most complex topics on earth. For free, all volunteers. And let's work full-time on it, nonstop for the next 6 months. That's a good idea. And that's what I did. 6 months, nonstop. I left that. I joined a coffee company as COO. Did that for 6 months. Left that, joined a startup making climate technology. Busy, 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 busy. And you know what kept happening? That same fucking story. It's all my fault. My needs don't matter. And nothing I ever do will be enough. And it wasn't until 18 months after I left KIT that I finally realized what I was doing to myself. I went to my weekly therapy session. Different therapist, by the way, as a solo therapist at this point. We're doing internal family systems, which is this mode of therapy where you look inside And I lay down on the couch. My therapist asks, "What do you notice?" I can feel my eyes moving rapidly, and that's always a sign there's a lot going on in there. There's a lot of parts active. He slows me down, and as I sit there, a scene starts to form. There's a well. There's a line of people walking by, dropping cups of water in the well. And there's this Batman figure, like Battle Batman, right by the edge of the well, trying to fight these people off with their water cups. Ah, I know Batman. That's one of my protectors. That's one of the ways that I defend myself. Oh my God, there's someone in the well. Who is that? It's a little boy. My therapist asks, "Well, who is the little boy?" It's me. It's a young me. And as I look up, the water's at my waist. It's dark, and I'm scared, and I'm alone. There's these people that are supposed to love me, that are supposed to care for me and be my friends. They're walking by, and they're just dumping water down here. Don't they know that I'm here? Don't drown me. Please. My therapist asks what I need in this moment. And I call up and I say, "Please, family, please, friends, please, Oli, please stop doing that job. You're going to drown me down here. I can't live like this anymore. I need your help." And immediately, it's like they all circle around the well. They stop dropping the water down. They point out the plug beneath me, and they hand me down a ladder. I swim down, I pull the plug, the water starts to drain, and I climb out. And as I get to the top, they surround me in a warm embrace and a hug. And it's like in this one moment, I finally see the story in real time. I've been down in a well all alone, trying to carry it all and drowning. And that's when I know two things. One, different company, different team, different mission, different environment, same story. And two, I'm not doing this anymore. It's time to quit that job, and it's time to be an entrepreneur again. Easier said than done. Walking out of there, I felt confident but terrified. Oh, I skipped my well. Well, oh well. I don't need that thing anymore anyways. That week, I was walking along the Willamette River talking to my longtime coach, Andy. And I was telling him about this therapy session. I was really excited. I feel like I saw the story for the first time. Let's do something about this. And then I said, "But I'm terrified. I just told my wife I wasn't going to leave my job for 6 months so she could make a career transition. She's going to hate me. We're going to fail just like the last time I started a business. We're going to be in debt. All this stuff's going to go wrong. We're never going to get there. Oh, and then I'm going to be a coach? Like, people think coaches are full of shit. Who wants to be a coach? No one wants to be a coach." And he says, "Okay, let's slow this down for a minute." And I realized the fear of failing in the business was actually a fear of going into debt. And that if I would just take responsibility for every dollar that came in, I would be fine. I'm perfectly capable of building a business. We were making almost $30 million a year. Being scared of people thinking I was full of shit by being a coach was actually a fear of being full of shit, of selling things I couldn't deliver on, and being another one of those guys. So I decided, well, I'll train like a professional athlete trains. I'll try and be one of the best coaches in the world. That'll fix that. And then last, being scared of not taking care of my wife was actually being scared of not having the love and support that I needed. And the trick there was just to ask for it. Will you trust me? Will you love me through this, even though we won't have the security that I promised you? And the coach was like, "Great, seems like we solved this today." He said, "But there's one more thing. I think you've tackled that old story, but I don't know if you fully let it go. And I think you're going to have to do that before you move on to a new one." And so he recommended this book about grief called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller. It's one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. It's my most recommended book in my coaching practice. And he said, listen, this story, this old one, has cost you a lot in your life. You got a lot of a backlog of grief here, my friend. And I think there's some rituals in this book that could really help you before you move on to the next thing. That same night, I listened to the entire book. And this quote captures exactly why Andy wanted me to read it. Ritual does not rid us of the wounds we carry or free us forever from the weight of grief. It's a maintenance practice that offers us the means of tending wounds and sorrows, offering our psyches regular periods of release and renewal. This hit home so much with me, and it was the first time I realized that grief isn't just when people die. Grief is when we lose anything. And what I had was a lifetime of grief that I needed to process. And so at dusk, I go out to our garden, and I sit by our fire pit, and I decide I'm going to do this fire ritual by myself tonight because that feels peaceful. I build a big, beautiful fire of orange and red flames, and I think about all that pain that I've lived through, how I've got here, what I've outgrown, and I start writing down each thing it's time to let go of. Silencing myself about that abuse, I'm done with that. Not asking for help for fear of being yelled at, I'm ready to let go of that too. Using an impossible standard to withhold love from myself and others, we're not doing that anymore. 2nd and 26 when UGA lost to Alabama in the national championship, I guess we should let that go. And that old story, yeah, it's time to let that one go too. It's not my fault. I know I'm not alone, and I have so much help, and I know there are people in my life who care about my needs. And I'm already loved. There's nothing I have to do to earn that. The tears hit me again as I think about all I've been carrying, all it's cost me. But I also feel lighter. And I know that even though I'm back at the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey again, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be for this phase. Here's the thing about all of this. If I hadn't gotten the help that I need, if I hadn't spoken up after I realized what I had been through, if I hadn't realized that that old story had become the ceiling for my life and for my career and for the love that I could experience, I wouldn't be an entrepreneur. I wouldn't be a coach. I wouldn't have any of these friends. I wouldn't be the CEO of a world-class training company that I love. I wouldn't be on this stage talking to you either. I'd still be stuck at the bottom of that well I forgot to put up here because I'm so done with it. But the most important thing that I wouldn't be, I want to capture in one final story. Before I tell you that, though, it's a quick one. 2 things. First, this talk has been about my story. My workshop tomorrow is about yours, and I'd love for you to join me. And second, I wrote a poem to help you remember this talk. And it's on my site at barrettbrooks.com/story. That's free. You don't have to give me your email or anything. But I think you'll enjoy it. Maybe you'll take it with you. So for that last story, a couple years back, my son and I, Miss Everett, we were sitting in the living room and right where my wife had given me the 3 options, and he was playing with his trains on the floor, and I think the train track broke or something like that. And he's so frustrated, and he comes over to me crying, and he says, "Dada, I'm sad. Will you hold me while I cry?" I said, "Oh, my son, yes. I would love to hold you while you cry." I picked him up just like this. I held him tight, and I gave him the love that I always wanted my whole life, that I didn't get in the way that I needed. But you know what else happened along the way? I did tell my dad. And you know what he did? He cried with me. he put his arm around me and held me too. And even though he couldn't do it when I was young, when I needed it, that's a change of the story too. And that's the most important part of what I got by letting that old story go. I finally got to be a son who was held. But much more importantly is that I get to be the husband and the father that Nicole and Everett and Paxton deserve. And that's why I started this whole journey to begin with. By outgrowing my old story, I made a new one possible for me and for my family. And I think you can too. Thank you.